मूर्ति व्योमवद् व्याप्त देहाय दक्षिणामूर्तये नमः। ओम शांति शांति शांति। श्री गुरुभ्यो नमः। हरि ओम. So we were doing the verse number 56, and give me 1 second. I'll go to that page where, yeah, so this is page 83, so I'd go there. Okay, so we were trying to understand about the relationship between Maya and Brahman, and what is the relationship. That is what we were sharing, and I'll just share the page with you. Yeah, and in this we have finished the verse number 54. Maya yaha brahmana ekadesha vrittitva kathanam. So Maya is there in one particular desha of Brahman. There is a certain doubt when we had a discussion on it during the last class. There's been a bit of a lapse of time, so let me touch upon it again. Whether Maya covers Brahman fully or in part, where does Maya stay? We know that Maya is superimposed on Brahman. There is some adhyasa. And with that Maya adhyasa, the nirvikara, nishkala, nirmala, suddha buddha swarupa, suddha Brahman becomes Ishvara, Maya upahita chaitanya, with the Maya upadhi. We have done that. Now the question is that if Maya covers the whole of Brahman, it fully covers it up, then is ever Jivan Mukti possible? Because for Jivan Mukti, to get liberation, you need to have Sakshatkara of Suddha Brahma. That Suddha Brahma Sakshatkara is not possible if whole of Brahman is covered with Maya. This is a very dull-minded student's question. That is why this particular verse in the 54th, the answer is Nanu Maya Saktihi Sadvatsu Adhisthana Syadyati. If it covers this, Tari Tasyaha Krishna Brahma Vrittitvam Ekadesha Bhaktvam. If Maya is there and it is covering Brahman, does it cover whole of Brahman or only a part of it? Adye mukta prapyam brahmana syad. Actually, if you think that it covers the whole, then you will actually never ever get liberation. Ditye shang satvapattihi. If you say it covers only one particular location of the Brahman, Maya covers only certain parts of the Brahman, but then what will be the doubt? If this Ajnana Andhakara doesn't cover, we have something called partial lunar and solar eclipse. We must have seen it. You must have seen it. You remember it, right? So you'd have a corner of the moon or the sun is covered up with the shadow, Rahu or Ketu. These are nodes. They are not actually physical entities. It's the shadow of the moon which falls on the sun, or the shadow, the moon is obstructed by the shadow of the earth itself. The sunlight doesn't fall on the moon, so on a full moonlight, moonlit night, on a full moon night, we aren't being able to see the full, moon in its fullness, but we see some part of it gets obstructed for a while. Similarly, the Maya covers one part of the Brahman. If you say this, like the moon and the sun get eclipsed in part, the Brahman gets eclipsed in part by Maya. If I say this, that means Brahman has shape and size. Sang Satvapattihi, that means that it has certain parts, so it has part and whole. You know what is the challenge? We have Desha Kala Vastu Parisheda Sunyam. That is how we describe Brahman. It is not limited by time, it's not limited or restricted by space, and it's not limited by physical existence. Why? Because it's not a physical entity. There is no whole and there is no part. But here, sang satvapatti, that means there are angsha angsi bhava. There are different of a big whole, and certain part is covered by Maya. The Brahman then gets delimited. इत्यादिकारikam iti akarikam mandadhyam shankam nirakartum tad buddhi anurupam. So according to the dullness of the mind, depends on how bright is the student, the teacher thinks about a solution. The teacher gives a solution according to the sharpness of the mind of the student. If he gives a very sophisticated answer, the student will not understand. Little boy asks a question about where is God, how do you know he exists. Some kind of a stupid answer is given by the mother or the father or the school teacher because they don't give you very sophisticated theological explanations. They give you some simple answer. There would be someone like, your dad is not at home, he's away from home for a long time, but then somebody is paying your bills, so it must be the dad. Similarly, there's somebody who is paying your bill, somebody who's taking care of you. Some kind of a story is told to you. Not because that story is a perfect answer, but because that's how you can resolve your doubt at that particular moment of time. Similarly, here, that Brahman is covered in part by Maya is similarly a very avantara uttara, in the sense this is an imperfect answer given to the student to resolve his doubt at a particular moment of enlightenment where that kind of an answer is all he needs. And then, of course, he will read a lot, he will do chintan, then some advanced answer will be given. Okay. Na Krishna Brahma Vritti Sa Sakti Kintu Ekadesha Bhak Ghatasaktir Yatha Bhumo Snigdham Riddeva Vartade. Now, for example, you have clay everywhere, earth everywhere. You have stone, that's also earth. You have sand, that's also earth. The earthliness as a property is available in the mountains, in sand, and fields, everywhere. But when you have wet clay, that particular part of earth is what is able to give rise to a jar, a pot. You can make a pot out of it because it has the properties which will help you have an earthen pot. Doesn't mean earth doesn't exist in desert or in sand or in all other forms of earth, also in stone. But what is adequate? What is necessary for you to give the shape to earth in the form of a pot or a jar? You need wet clay. Similarly, only in one aspect of earth you have the possibility of a earthen pot hiding. The potential to form an earthen clay is limited to wet clay. Similarly, the Maya covers only one aspect of the Brahman. This we have discussed. And then we are going to the verse number 55, and we had also touched upon it. Now, in the Drashtantika, he's talking about how that works. Paramatmani mayayaha ekadesa vrittitvam shruti smriti prasiddham iti achakshana tatra pratham padosya sarva bhutani tripadashyamritam divi iti chandogya shruti arthata padati pada iti. He's saying, look, I'll give you some evidence. There are different kinds of evidences given about presence of God in theology and about everything. One of the evidences which is given is called Pratyaksha Pramana. What is that? Pratyaksha Pramana is sense perception, observation. You see and you verify. It's sensorily verifiable, Pratyaksha Pramana. The other one is you have Anumana Pramana, you have some ontological argument, like you have some a priori, you have some philosophical logic through which you prove God exists. Like the Nyayikas in India would try to establish the existence of God by saying, look here, this whole creation is a Karya Rupa, it's a product, like a ghata, like a pot. Therefore, there must be a creator, like for a pot, you have to have a kulala or a potter. Similarly, you have to have kritimatvam. There should be some agency which is responsible for this whole creation. How is it possible to think about a creation without a creator? It's also called the intelligent design argument. But here, there is a lot of logical argumentation which is given by different theologians in the West and in the East. One of the arguments is that this kritimatva, some kind of an agency, needs to be attributed. Without this vast creation is difficult to understand. Why so? Atoms are there. They create that God arranges these atoms in different proportions to create a flower, a tree, a mountain. These are all made of atoms. Who arranges them? Who gives them a sense of purpose? There has to be something. Why they are not conflicting with each other? Why there is no chaotic kind of a creation? Why there is some kind of an order? It's a kind of a mixture of different arguments, but the key point up here is that it seems that there is a designer, there is a creator, and that God must exist. The Nyayika is a logical explanation. And in their big fight with the Buddhists, they would try to establish that no, don't say nothing exists. The atoms are permanent entities, and these atoms are arranged to create in different proportions, different methods. These atoms are brought together to assume different names and forms, and these names and forms, like the Vedanti argues, are not unreal. These are not ephemeral. They are not only apparent realities, but they are real realities. This is the reality. God has created this in Nyaya logic. Now, he is the Chandogya Upanishad. This is called evidence through testimony. Okay, testimonial truth in the sense that they will quote some authority, Shabda Pramana, another mode of proof. What is Shabda Pramana? The Vedas. It's written in the Vedas, and therefore we must accept that is true. But why accept Vedas is true? Why not other stories and novels and histories and autobiographies? They say no. There is a difference between the Vedas. They are apurusheya. They are authorless texts. There is no author as such. These are eternal truths, and these truths are not revealed to any individual. Rishayaha mantra drashtaraha. They saw these mantras, they just captured them in their consciousness, but these mantras exist independent of human minds which capture these mantras. They are apurusheya. They come out of the breath of Brahma. So they are eternal truths. That is how the theory about the Vedas say that they are not a creation of a human mind. They must be true. They are eternal truths. Nobody has written them. And they are quoting the Chandogya Upanishad, Padosya Sarva Bhutani. Of these Brahman, Asya Brahmanaha Padaha Sarva Bhutani. One foot, actually, one step. Tripadyamritam Divi, and 3/4 of it, it's actually 3/4 of it is invisible. It's extremely subtle. Sounds very familiar if you look at it from the point of view of physics. Physics says that, okay, majority of all that you see, solid, liquid, and gas, is roughly about 20%. All of it is plasma. Similarly, the Upanishads say, Padosya Sarva Bhutani, Tripadasyaamritam Divi. Is that eternal, unknown, invisible, inaccessible substance? That is what is the major part of it. And what is visible to our eyes? Only 1/4 of it. You know, how is it interesting? Because that which appears real to us is a game of Maya, which means only 1/4 of the Brahman can be covered by Maya, because only 1/4 appears as Pasruti, as earth, rivers, mountains, sky, sun, moon, everything, these galaxies. There's only 1/4 of this Brahman, because they manifest and they appear different from what is, that pure isness. Definitely they are covered with Maya. So Maya Upadhi wraps about 1/4 of the Brahman. Chandogya 3:12:6. Shrutim arthatah patati pada iti. He's saying padosya sarva bhutani tripadasti swayam pravaha ityeka desha vrittitvam mayaya vadati shrutihi. This was the 55th sloka that we had done. Sarva bhutani akasadini. What is the bhuta varga pancha? Panchikrita pancha mahabhuta. What are these? You have apanchikrita mahabhuta and panchikrita mahabhuta. Apanchikrita mahabhuta is sukshma bhuta, mahabhuta, which you cannot see. Out of which our jnanendriyas are made, our karmendriyas are made. Out of these subtle, you see, these are subtle sukshma bhutas, subtle bhuta vargas, and then they appear in physical forms through a process of panchikarana. They become gross from subtle, and that is what we connect and describe as Panchabhuta. What are these five? Akasha, Vayu, then Agni, and a Jala, and a Prithvi Tattva. Five. And these are five Jnanendriyas through which we access them. Akasha through the ears, because that's Sabda Gunakam Akasham. Akasha has that sound is what resides in the space in Akasha. Vayu sparshavatvam, so that touch thing through air, you touch, you feel cold and heat through touch of your skin. That is your Jnanendriya, Tvacha. And then third, Chakshundriya, Teja, you see where in fire. And finally, you see water. Water is Rasagunakam. So you test, it has test. And what is the Indriya? You have the, Rasanendriya, you have the Jiva, the tongue. And finally, you have smell. Through the nose, you smell it. Sa gandhavati prithvi nitya nitya. The prithvi has gandha. These are the five qualities. Five properties of five panchabhutas. Okay. But it starts with what? Starts with that Sat, the Brahma Vastu, out of which all these panchabhutas get created. Iti ekadesha vrittitvam mayayaha vadati shrutihi. Shruti tells about that it covers only 1/4, ekadesha. It's not a physical way in which proportionally we're saying 1/4 of Brahman is covered by Maya. This is a metaphoric way of describing, saying that because the Shruti says 1/4 of the absolute Brahman becomes visible as this physical universe, so therefore that proportional section of the Brahman is very imaginary and yet good to believe in it for the purpose of an easy way to understand it, saying these are covered up with Maya. Sarva Bhutani Akasadini. Bhutani means starting with Akasha, then Vayu, then Agni, then Jala, then Stavara Jangamadini. Stavara Astavara. Moving and unmoving. Karyani. Animate, inanimate. Karyani. Sarva iti chandasam. All this. Asya Parabrahmanaha Padaha Chaturdhangshaha. So you have, if you divide that imaginary way into four parts, one part of it is visible. Sistha tripad pada triyatmakaha swayam pravaha swayam prakasha. So the 3/4 of it is swayam prakasha Brahman. Require anything to, it's not physically visible. Iti mayayaha ekadesha vrittitvam maya karya bhuta bhuta gramasya chaturdhangshatvena. ठीक है, वर्णितत्वात् तत् कारणभूतायाः मायाः अपि एकदेशवृत्तित्वं निरुक्तश्रुत्युक्त प्रायम् एव इति भावः. Because Shruti says one part of me is visible to you as the phenomenal world. Right? Shruti says this. Now, Professor is explaining to us because one fourth of Shruti, whatever we see, constitute only one fourth of this whole Brahman. Then only that one fourth is what is covered with Maya. Because Brahman per se is without any attributes, it's not visible to the naked eyes. Because one fourth of it is visible to us as per the Shruti, as per the Upanishads, that one fourth must be covered with Maya, is the argument. Aparichinnad brahmanah parichinnasya jagatah atyalpatam bodhaitum. The Brahman is aparichinna, means non-restricted, unlimited by time, space, location, etc. So, ekadesha vrittitvam नियुक्तस्त्युक्तं स्वत्युक्तप्रायम् एव इति भावः अपरिच्छिन्नात् ब्रह्मणः परिच्छिन्नस्य जगतः अति अल्पता. The Jagat is just a tiny part of this fundamental reality called Brahman. This whole physical universe, galaxies, universe, cosmos, whatever word you use, it's only a tiny part of the Brahman which is visible. The rest of it is not visible to us. जगतः अत्यल्पतां बोधयितु मायायाः चतुर्थांश वृत्तित्वम् उपदिष्टम्. Why is he talking about one fourth of it is visible, three-fourths of it is not visible? Not because he is doing some kind of a division or some kind of a geometric isolation of the physical universe from rest of it which is not visible. That is not the purpose here. In our position, the measurability of reality is not so important. You grasp the essential nature of reality. You don't have to put them into proportion and this and that. These are not considered very significant because the very nature of the phenomenal reality is that even though it's measurable, it's not ultimately real. Like you count 7 colors in the rainbow. Is the rainbow real? Can you waste your time measuring how many gallons of blue water are there in a mirage? It doesn't exist. It looks like a blue lake, but there's no water. Why waste time in measuring? Some people question this, that this is a very otherworldly orientation of Indian philosophy, because of which Indians are not very good at writing history. Indians are not very good at giving a lot of importance to location, even though there is a lot of reference, not very well, because these people are otherworldly, all the time thinking about Brahman and Swarga and all that. Not we don't we haven't had a very strong empirical tradition in philosophy, experimentation, observation. They have in physics, but more comfortable with abstract ideas. That's one of the criticisms. But the purpose behind this abstract orientedness is, in fact, to grasp the ultimate truth, which in fact is not measurable because it's not accessible to our senses. All the instruments for measuring reality that we have is an extension of our sense perception, isn't it? It's an extension. You might use the word micron. End of the day, you're talking about distance, you're talking about lengths. No? So, therefore, he's saying, Nasti Vastutah Chaturdhangshaha. There is not actually a one fourth of reality is what we see the physical universe. That's not the idea. But in order to tell us that it's only a tiny part of that grand reality called the Brahman, which is visible to our eyes. Tasya nirangshatvat, Brahmanaha nirangshatvat. It doesn't have parts and whole. There is no angsha angsi bhava. It's nirangshatvat. Ditvadi sankhayam ekatva dvayadi bhavepi ekatva dvayadi rupam dvitva. What is this here? Ditvadi Dvityavad iti ekadeshinaha yatha manyante tadvat. So you see, two-ness, three-ness. You have these three fingers. These are three fingers, so they will have tritva in it. There are two fingers, there will be dvitva in it. There is a bit of discussion about it in the Nyaya Shastra. You're saying, like, what is eka? Ekatva. It's only a number. It doesn't refer to any physical entity as such. It's only a number. It's a conceptual thing. It's not a physical reality. And it's an attribute. Okay. So we are not getting into that Nyaya discussion right now. Now in the verse number 56, Asmena Arthe Shmritim Pramanayati. Shruti is over. He quoted from the Chandogya Upanishad. Now he's saying, I can also show you in the Bhagavad Gita, where he's saying you go to the 10th chapter in the Bhagavad Gita. Bhagavan himself says, Vistamyaham idam krishnam ekankshena sthito jagate iti krishnurjuna yaha jagatastweka desatam. He says, okay, if you don't like what I'm saying, I can solve your problem. How can you solve my problem? He's saying, no, I'll take you to the Srimad Bhagavad Gita. Okay. So what will happen in Bhagavad Gita? What can you show me there? He says, no, I have some answer there. You go to the 10th chapter and 42nd shloka. Okay. I'm just opening the 10th chapter in another web page and I'll just show you the 42nd shloka. What does it say? In the he's saying, Athava bahunetena kingyatena tavarjuna Vistamyahamidam Krishnam ekanshena sthito jagat. Bhagavan is explaining to Arjuna. He wanted to know how everything is happening. Bhagavan says, what is the point of narrating to you all the details in which I create this whole universe? I play around with and so many people, so many animals, there's so many galaxies, and you are on a tiny piece of it's like a speck of earth called Earth, Prithvi. And then there is a Hastinapura, and then you are fighting for the kingdom. It's not even compared with a small tiny pebble if you compare your reality with the whole universe. And Bhagavan says, Bistamyaham idam Krishnam ekanksena sthito jagata. Do you know this? I'm the whole universe. All that you see around you is a tiny speck of it. If you compare me with reality, what you are together, this whole physical universe, is like a tiny speck. So Bhagavan is saying, I have created this universe, but it's a tiny part of the grand reality which I am. And what you're seeing is just a tiny part of it. Okay? And that is very, very interesting. And therefore, here, what Bhagavan does as we move forward, he is saying, Vistamyahamidam Krishnam ekanksena sthito jagate iti Krishna Arjunaya aha. He said this to Arjuna. Jagatastu ekadesatam. Jagatahatu ekadesatam. That means this whole physical universe is only a tiny part of the grand infinite reality called the Brahman or the Supreme Absolute. Bhagavan says, I created it because he is representing the truth of this whole universe as an individual to tell the truth to us. Brahman is Nirakara. It doesn't have name and form. But to reveal the story, he has taken human form. That is how it is. Vistabhya visheshana vapya spashtamanyata. So this is how in the verse number 56, Bhagavan had a wonderful way in which he's revealing the secrets of this universe. Here, what are we discussing? We are discussing the same old thing. What is the relationship between Maya and Brahman? Does it cover the whole of it? Or is covering only a little? Vishtavya. Visheshana Vapya Vishtebhya Visheshana Vapya Ekanksena Ekadeshana Alpangsha Rupena Krishnam Jagata Sampurnam Jagata. It's like Bhagavan says, a tiny part of it, it's like covers this whole universe. So here, how this particular Bhagavad Gita shloka is relevant to our discussion, the 42nd shloka of the 10th chapter. It is relevant in this sense that here, this Jagat, this physical universe, is only ekadeshatvam. It has only a tiny partness in it of the whole Brahman. Ekadeshatvam dodidam na to Krishna prasaranam. It doesn't cover the whole of the universe. How does Maya come into the picture? Because whatever is visible to our eyes is because of the game of Maya. So Maya must be covering only a tiny part of this grand reality called Brahman, and therefore that tiny part is what is appearing as Jagat. It gets inverted. The reality gets inverted and appears as Jagat. And what gets inverted, Bhagavan says, is a tiny part of him. That is what, like the Jadugar is standing on the stage, to give you an example. So he moves his fingers a little and he suddenly materializes a small sparrow. Is this sparrow all over his body? No, between his two fingers. He did something like this, and you see a beautiful sparrow. Similarly, this Maya, the game of Maya, covers only a tiny part of Brahman, and then it appears as Jagat. Jata aham akasha rupena brahma bhutattvena sarvam idam jagat tishtami etadutya brahmanaha asankheyam aha. So what he's trying to say is, it's not a difference in measurement that the Jagat is 10, 1/10 or 100, or some decimal systems you will bring in, mathematical will represent it. That's not the purpose. What is the purpose? It's not to count how much reality of Brahman has become Sansara or Jagat. The purpose is to only see the distinction between the grandness of Brahman, which is infinite, and the smallness of Jagat, which appears so grand in front of us. Mark my words. The real is what we should associate with the Brahman, which is not visible. What is visible, we call a grand reality, this whole grand universe, but actually it's a tiny part of that invisible grand reality. What appears as non existent is in fact a grand reality. What appears as a grand reality is in fact a very tiny part of it, which has got inverted, and therefore it appears as real to us, and the real appears as invisible to us. The truth of the Brahman appears as invisible to us. Therefore, Jagataha Prithak Bhava Anubhavyate Natu Brahma Jagatur Avinna Swarupena Sarvatra Pariplavanam. So, you Jagat doesn't cover whole of Brahman. Maya doesn't cover whole of Brahman. Tasma Jagat Mayam Brahmana Kevalam Kinchit Itam Vikshepa Khetrameva. This laya and a vikshepa, avarana and a vikshepa, there are two works of Maya. One is avarana sakti, and there is other one is vikshepa sakti. I've given this example several times. When you see a rope and you see a snake, there are two things happening. One, you could not see the rope. That is the avarana sakti of Maya, inability to see the truth. Then see the untruth as truth is the vikshepa sakti. When you cannot see X as X, that is Avarana Sakti. When you see X as Y, that is Vikshepa Sakti. There is a twist in the story which is created by this Vikshepa Sakti. This whole Jagat. First thing, Brahman is not visible because of the Avarana Sakti of Maya. This Brahman appears as Jagat, that is the Vikshepa Sakti, the Maya. Natu Brahma Sariram Sarva Vyapakam Vastugatam Bhagavata Eva Uktam Yad Yad Vibhuti Mat Sattvam right? Srimat urjitameva va tat tat eva avagachatvam mama tejo angsho sambhavam. Bhagavad Gita in the 41st sloka, just before the one we read, is saying, look, whatever you see around you is on account of my blessings. I have created this. Always remember me and move towards me. And please understand the grandness of this supreme reality is not available to your senses. Whatever you see is just a very, very tiny part of it. Okay. So Jagat Brahmana Tejo Angshamatram Shudra Kalpita Dehasa Eva Paramarthataha Mithyattvena Upannamiti Advaita Siddhantaha Prasadhyade. So one of the commentators is saying, look here, all that you see is in fact, it's mithya in the sense it's neither sat nor asat. It's anirvachaniya maya thing. It's indescribable reality which appears as real, but fundamentally not real. It's a phenomenal reality. Okay. Now, how do I know? Now, so far we have discussed about Brahman and Maya and what is the relationship and how much of Brahman the Maya covers. What would be your next question in mind? The question would be, now tell me, how do you prove through your Shruti and Smriti, that Shabda Pramana, by authority, you are quoting the Upanishads, you're quoting the Bhagavad Gita, then why don't you tell me how to prove to me that the Suddha Brahman is absolutely not touched by Maya and is far grander, it's really infinite, and Maya has no access to all of it. We have no access to all of it, and it's not touched by Maya. Is there any Shruti Pramana you can give? He's saying yes. Then he's quoting from the Svetasvatara Upanishad. Sabhuvim Vishwato Britva Tyatistatdasangulam Vikaravarti Chatrasti Shruti Sutra Krutur Vachaha. Sutra is Brahma Sutra, Vadarayana Krita. And then Shruti is the Svetasvatara Upanishad. There is a lot of discussion and controversy about this Upanishad. This is a later day Upanishad, some people believe, because there's a lot of discussion, there's a lot of influence of the Sankhya Darshana in this particular text. There's Purusha and Prakriti and all that. There are a few shlokas or mantras in this Upanishad which kind of point at duality, and therefore this is very dear to the Vaishnavas and the Shaivite and the Saktas. The Advaita Vedanta in Shankaracharya per se is said not to have written an original commentary on it, and there is a Sankara Bhashya available. By looking at the way this Bhashya is written, some scholars give this opinion that this is written by one of the Sankaracharya. But this Upanishad is a kind of very advanced text because it summarizes, it's very eclectic, and it's an Upanishad and the commentary per se, if you read, it the whole of Advaita Vedanta and gives very good explanation. So if you have not read any Upanishad, if you read the commentary of it and this Upanishad, you will have a very good introduction to all other Upanishads. But some people say this was not a Upanishad which Shankaracharya chose to comment on. However, this Upanishad is being quoted in this sloka. Sa bhumim vishwato britva. This physical bhumim vishwataha sarvataha britva. That means it covers. That means vapya. He pervaded this physical universe. Okay. So he pervaded it sarvataha, all over. Ati atishtad. He goes beyond it. Atistat. He existed beyond it. It's like you have a small stool and you bring a big tablecloth. It's for a large dinner table, and you have a tiny stool, and you cover that tiny stool with that large table cloth. What happens? It falls all over. If you put a double bed cover on a divan or a sofa set, what happens? You have a lot of surplus bed, the bed cover falling all around. Similarly, this Brahman, bhumim vishwataha vritva ati tishtad dasangulam. So he says, this particular physical reality is comparable to the 10 fingers. Look, again, this measurable description. There is a temptation to believe that the Supreme Brahman is like a physical body because you see the Purusha Sukta. Vikaravarti chatrasti Shruti Sutra Krutu Vachaha. And therefore, this sansara is what undergoes the changes. The Brahman doesn't undergo any changes. And we have the words of the Shruti as well as the Sutra, the Brahma Sutra. Look at these commentary. And commentary is very elaborate. The text, if we just look at it, Sa Paramatma Bhumim Jagat. Bhumi means Jagat, this whole physical universe. Vishwataha means Sarvataha. Samantataha Vritva covers this. Dasangulam Ati Tishtat. So he sort of, this whole physical universe is like 10 fingers. Atirichya Atishtat. So he goes beyond this tiny, it's like a very tiny part for him. Natra dasasavdaha kevala dasatva sankhya vachakaha. Angulam, 10 fingers. No, it doesn't have anything to do with the number 10 here. It's not sankhya vachakaha. The purpose here is not to say that this whole physical universe is comparable with 10 fingers of the Lord of the universe. No. Kintu jagad apekshaya tasya bhuyastva bodhanapara. Essentially, the purpose of mentioning this dasangulam is to say that the Brahman or the supreme reality is far bigger, incomparable, and it goes much beyond what we can conceive of as the physical universe. Sweta Svetara Sritihi, if you look at the 3rd chapter, and this is sloka number 14 or the 14. Na parabrahma vikaravarti cha vikaraha surya mandaladeyaha. The Brahman doesn't undergo any change. What undergo the changes? The Jagat, the physical universe. Surya mandaladeyaha, you have the sun, the moon, you have the black hole and dwarf and star and all that. The whole astrophysics that you're dealing with, cosmology and all that, yes, there are a lot of changes. Therefore, physics will apply. What about Brahman? Well, physics can't reach there. It's beyond the science of physics which deals with this physical universe. It's beyond that. Tebi avarti tavan matra parichinnaha. Atra asmane vishaye Shruti Sutra Kruto Vachaha, Shruter Vachaha. He quotes both the Shruti and the Sutra, Brahma Sutra. Sutta Kruto Vachastu Vikaravarti cha tathahi siti maha iti. In the 4th chapter of the Brahma Sutra, you go to the last section, verse number 19, he will deal with it. That what is the physical universe, that only undergoes changes. The Brahman doesn't undergo any kind of changes. And this has been explained in so many these Brahma Sutra. Vikaravarti cha tathahi sthiti maha. Vikaravarti apicha nitya muktam parameshwaram rupam na kevalam. This is Sankara Bhashya and the Brahma Sutra. Vikaravarti apicha nitya muktam. Look, this Brahman creates the sansara. The sansara is not different from Brahman. Brahman itself has become sansara through vivarta parinama. It's a projected transmission of the Brahman. Unlike the Ramanuja Mata or the Madhvacharya Mata, Ramanuja Mata is Brahma Parinama Bhada. He undergoes changes. So Vikaravarti api. So there is this Vikara. In what sense? It's a projected transmission. Api Nitya Muktam, and yet it's all the time eternal. The Brahman becomes Sansara, remains Brahman. Punnamadaha Punnamidam. It remains infinite, remains the whole all the time. Parameshwaram Rupam Na Kevalam Vikaramatra Savitra Mandala Adi Adhishanam Tathahi Asya Dviripam Sitimaha Amnayaha Tavanasya Mahima Tato Jayang Shapurushaha. What is the greatest of all that is great or whatever is that Purusha, that ultimate thing. Padosya Sarva Bhutani Tripadashyamritam Divi Ityeva Mati. In Purusha Shukta is there, and also in the Shvetashvata Upanishad is there. That one part of it is this whole physical universe in the Chandogya Upanishad, and the 3/4 of it is that Swayam Prabha, is that the eternal reality. Na chat vikara rupam itaralam manaha Iti sakyam vaktum akratutvatati. So ultimately, you know, this particular 3/4, you cannot say they are undergoing any changes, because there's no creation. It's eternal, that truth. That means absolutely unaffected by anything. Atasya yatha eva dviripe parameshwari nirgunam rupam anavapya sagunam eva avatistante evam sagunopi niravagraham Aishwaryam anabhapya savagraha eva avatistante iti drashtabhyam. Look, that Parameshwara is just like Thakur Ramakrishna Paramahansa used to say, is saguna and nirguna. You cannot decide. And someone says, don't you think Brahman should be nirakara? Absolutely no changes, nothing. He says, wonderful idea. So you want to decide how God would look like? You want to theorize about God? Fine, go write books, not a problem. But you cannot take the authority in your hands to decide how God should look like, whether he should be with or without form. Who are you to decide that? You should have a sense of surrender and exploration, a sense of devotion, because you're talking about a reality of which you are not the knower. Please understand the philosophical point here. Of course, you are trying to know God. We are all trying to know God. But it's beyond us. Is that supreme reality through which we are known. The light of that, that is the source of all light, all knowledge, all wisdom, all intelligence. Therefore, with that kind of an approach to that supreme reality, it's not for me to theorize and decide it's going to look like this. Like, for example, you write a constitution and decide how India is going to look like for the next 500 years, 1,000 years. You're going to write a constitution in the spiritual realm where you decide how God has to behave, what God is to look like. This is beyond us. Therefore, the Shruti only gives you a few insights. Those insights, if we reflect on, we are supposed to cultivate in us a sense of humility and inclusiveness and plurality, because none of us actually, know without any doubt or question. That's not possible. That is a beautiful way, in fact, to inculcate a sense of spirituality where we read the texts, we get into the religious texts, all that we are doing, but then we also transcend all of it and open our consciousness to that great reality, which is free from all restrictions. It may have form, it may not have form. It's not for us to decide. That's what Thakur Ramakrishna used to say, and that always sticks when you think about it. So, Sa Paramatma Bhumim Jagad Vishwataha Samantadaha Vritva, that is what we have done. Okay. So, what is this particular shloka conveying to us? The tatparya of this is like this. because of the Maya Upadhi. Okay? So there is a imagined atikramana. As if God is overstepping this physical reality. God is not going anywhere. Why? He's infinite. He doesn't have to go or come anywhere. God cannot go anywhere. You know this? Why? God is everywhere. God cannot go anywhere. We are doing Rath Yatras and we are doing all kinds of Sobha Yatras, but can God go anywhere? Jagannath is shown as without having any feet. And when I reflect on it, he said, yeah, it's very Upanishadic. What will he do with feet? Does he have to go anywhere? Where he is not? Show me some space where he can go. It doesn't have hands. Papa Punya, it's all up to you. He gives and takes without having physical hands because it's not a physical entity. He's just Drashta, that supreme witness. Jagannath has two large eyes. He listens, speaks without a mouth. He takes food without. These are all imaginations. This is for the lover devotee's way to approach the divine. But if you reflect philosophically on it, and you will go slowly beyond it. Adhyaropa papada. We are all these intermittent constructions. You have one construction and then you transcend it, then you have another construction and you have another construction of the truth through your mystical religious experience, and you go beyond one step to the other. That is our pedagogy. That we first presume a set of ideas, we convey to the student as if they're absolutely true to enable the student to graduate to the next level. The student himself or herself slowly graduates to greater understanding of the same thing, same text. It makes sense in different ways as he moves forward. So, Atikramana Dviti, not to Brahmana Desateya Bhagavatave Vistaraha. Actually, the Brahman doesn't go forward. No. Dasangalamiti dasapta sankhayam na grahya apitu jagadapekhya brahmanaha atikrushta mahatvam aprameyatvam anantatam susayati. It's essentially trying to convey that the Brahman is beyond any measurement. It's infinite. It's beyond all thoughts, all projections. That is why this Dasangalam 10 figures, this whole Svetasvatara Upanishad in the 14th sloka. Eko deva sarvabhuteshu gudaha sarvavyapi sarvabhutantaratma. So this Brahman is only one, and then it's in all of us. We say Narayana Purusha is in you, Narayana Purusha is in me. There is this lovely story I keep telling, but we don't have time to, because I want to at least finish the verse numbers. Two more verses we must finish. We have about 6 minutes. Okay, saying that the Brahman ultimately, it's it's Satchidananda Swarup all the time. It's Anavila, not touched by anything. It's the Nitya. But it's covered with these vikaras, these Maya Krita vikaras. It's like you are a teacher and you have a bunch of students very mischievous. That particular day is Teacher's Day. You are gone. You know what happens? They come, say, ma'am, come, sir, come, today is Teacher's Day, and then they bring a cake and they give you flowers and this and that dancing. You cannot get angry also because they are doing everything for you. So you sit quiet. You are waiting when it's going to get over so that I can start taking my class, or I can go to take some other class in some other classroom. But there you're caught up with everything. Similarly, the Brahman is kind of caught up in the samsara. It's not touched by anything. And yet, metaphorically speaking, the samsara appears as real. As if Brahman also is undergoing some vikaras. No. And therefore, in the verse number 58, now we'll graduate to the next one. Maya yaha param brahmaika desha bhaktva kathanena tasya savaivatva praptim asankhya aha. The moment you said all this, the problem is somebody would say, oh, really? So Brahman has part and whole. So there's some kind of a physicality to the Brahman, and it's refuted immediately in the verse number 58. Nirangsepyam samaropya krishning sebeti prishchataha tadabhasayottaram brute Shruti Sotruhiteshini. The child is asking a set of funny questions, and the mother is very kind, and it gives very hilarious answers. It gives hilarious answers. Like, for example, the boy is saying, I saw that in one of the reels, very interesting. The father was very compassionate. The little girl is saying, Papa, I don't want to go to the school because my eyes are not opening and my nose are not opening. One nose is still closed. I can't breathe properly. The father laughs and says, you go to school and slowly the nose will open. The daughter wants to play game with the dad and says, so dad, what do you say? My nostrils are also lazy like me. They'll open up after some time. Like I sometimes wake up late. The papa says, yeah, because that's your nose. It's quite possible that it's a little lazy or it's playing a game like you do sometimes. The daughter laughs and goes to school. It's a beautiful game. Similarly, here, Shruti Bhagavati, the Vedas are comparable. Very interesting. I love this idea. The mother is the first teacher. Therefore, the Vedas are compared. It's a very gender sensitive thing. It's always Shruti is Srilinga, Shruti Bhagavati. She's the mother. Why? Because you learn everything from there. It's the ultimate scripture, so it's compared with a mother. Shruti Bhagavati. So, Srotru Hiteishini, the mother loves the child. The Vedas, the Upanishads, they are like the mother. So, mother is all the time full of love. So, whosoever listens to it, it wants to benefit it. It wants Hiteishini, all the time full of goodwill for the listener. Shrutihi, Sotru Hiteishini. That Shruti Bhagavati says, Brite, Tadavhasaya Uttaram. In whose language? The language of the dull minded student who is asking a funny question has to be answered in the same language, then he would only understand. Like the papa was explaining to the lazy and mischievous daughter who doesn't want to go to school. Nirang sepi angsam aropya. The Brahman is Nirangsha. Krishning se ba iti pruchataha. Now the question of the student is, what is this? This Maya Adhyaropana, the superimposition of the Maya is in one part of the Brahman. Or can I ask you an alternative question? What you think is Adhyaropita or Adhyasita or covered up by Maya, is that all Brahman? These two questions would come. And then that would be answered in the next verse. Sulava Pada Yodhana is very easy to understand because the commentator presumes everybody is very good at Sanskrit. Dveta Bhasam Asritya Pruchataha Mandadhiyaha. The guy who is explaining, raising questions in the language of dualism, Mandadhiya Vishayasya Sugamatayi Taya Eva Asaya Uttaramapi. Then how do you explain it? He's asking this question as if he's a dualist, so he has to be answered. Samadhiyateti bhavaha. You have to do samadhana in his own language. Evam samadhitayaha mayayaha prayojanam sadrishtandamaha sad iti. Then the verse number 59. And just about 1 minute. But because we have completed the time, it's okay. We have completed 1 hour, so we'll stop here, and we'll meet again tomorrow, and we'll take it forward from there. Om Purnamadaha Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnash